The Indian monsoon has arrived. The Western Ghats, a chain of mountains that run along the west coast of India, are the first to receive this life-giving bounty. But the Ghats are greedy. They act as a dam for these rivers in the sky. The plentiful monsoon winds, thus blocked, empty their precious cargo of rain onto the mountains, creating a long rain shadow to the east. While the Western Ghats luxuriate in dense forests, the drier eastern plains and Deccan Plateau make do with what little they get. Here, the rain comes later and is more fitful. As a result, this vast plateau covering most of central peninsular India is a savanna. A team of scientists and conservationists led by Dr. Abhi Vanak and Dr. Maria Thaker started a study to understand the threatened and fast-changing grassland ecosystems and how the species that use these landscapes adapt to human pressures and changes. They decided to focus on a set of species that are rarely studied and which we know very little about: the mesocarnivores.
So a mesocarnivore is a small to medium-sized carnivore. 15 kilos or less is usually what we use to define a mesocarnivore. They fit in the food web right in the middle. And so usually people think of predators as tigers and leopards, and they're the top predators of an ecosystem. And they play fantastic roles in structuring what a food web does. But mesocarnivores, by being in between, actually play a really special role. So they fill this really interesting intermediate role in a food web. So understanding what's happening at that level gives us really interesting insights as to how the food web is structured and how important it is to have so many players. If we pay close attention to where they're going and what they're doing, it actually allows us to piece together the puzzle. Now, the only way to get information like that is to track. And so to put trackers or tags on animals and follow them continuously, which means then we can watch their lives unfold and their use of the landscape unfold right in front of us. It tells us so much about this environment.
The drier parts of the central Indian region are dominated by savanna grasslands. The team spent a lot of time trying to find a location that was home to a wide variety of mesocarnivores, but also had human activity.
So we did a fairly large scale survey of savanna ecosystems because that's what I was particularly interested in studying. And the reason we eventually chose Baramati was it has a good mix of everything that we're looking for. It's got the grasslands, it's got rain-fed agriculture, it has irrigated agriculture, it has some industrial areas, it has human settlements. There's also poultry farms coming up all over the place. Given all of those things, this landscape was really well suited for that.
Once the right set of people were identified, choosing the right set of equipment was important for the project to achieve its objectives. Two types of specialized equipment were crucial for the success of the project: traps to capture animals and collars and receivers to track them.
तर ॲनिमल कॅप्चरिंगसाठीची प्रोसेस जी सुरू होते ती बेसिकली सायन्स सर्वेजवरनं होती की आम्ही पहिल्यांदा फील्डवरती जातो, सायन्स चेक करतो आणि त्या ठिकाणी जाऊन मग ट्रॅक प्लॉट तयार. ट्रॅक प्लॉट म्हणजे काय, ते 1 मीटर बाय 1 मीटरचा एरिया क्लिअर करणे, त्याच्यावरती फाईन डस्ट टाकणे आणि तिथे एक ल्युअर असतं आमच्याकडे, एक बेसिकली एक केमिकल म्हणू शकतो आपण त्याला, की जे थोडंफार त्याच्यातनं दुर्गंधी निर्माण करतं. तर हे तिथे ठेवलं जातं. सुरुवातीचे 1-2 दिवस फक्त हीच प्रोसिजर फॉलो होते. साधारणपणे 3ऱ्या दिवशी आम्ही तिथे कॅमेरा ट्रॅप्स लावायला सुरुवात करतो, जे बेसिकली ऑटोमेटेड असतात, की जिथे समोर काही मोशन झाली, काही हालचाल झाली की तो कॅमेरा फोटो किंवा व्हिडिओ काढतो आणि मग आम्ही बघतो की काय प्रेझेन्स येत आहेत तिथे, कुठले कुठले ॲनिमल्स येत आहेत आणि मग ती प्रोसिजर आम्ही अजून 1-2 दिवस पुढे कंटिन्यू ठेवतो. त्याच्यानंतर हे त्याच्यामध्ये कन्फर्म होतं की साधारणपणे ॲनिमल्सची त्या ट्रॅक प्लॉटवरती येण्याची वेळ काय आहे आणि मग असे मल्टिपल ट्रॅक प्लॉट्स असतात एरियामध्ये आणि त्या टायमिंगवरनं आम्ही ठरवतो की सगळ्यात लवकर कुठल्या ट्रॅक प्लॉटवरती ॲनिमल येतो आहे. तर असे ट्रॅक प्लॉट्स निवडले जातात फक्त ॲनिमल ट्रॅपिंगसाठी ॲक्च्युअली. आणि मग तिकडे आम्ही जे ट्रॅप डिप्लॉय करतो, जे वेगवेगळ्या साईजेसचे स्पीशीज साईजप्रमाणे जे ठरलेले असतात ते ट्रॅप डिप्लॉय करून तिथे त्याला एक रेडिओ कॉलर लावतो बाजूला, ज्याच्याला एक मॅग्नेट असतं. जसं ॲनिमल त्याच्यामध्ये ट्रॅप होतो त्याच्या हालचालीनी झटापटीनी ते मॅग्नेट पुल होतं आणि आम्ही जिथे थांबलेलो असतो तिकडे आम्हाला त्याचा सिग्नलला सुरुवात होतं की आम्हाला कळतं ॲनिमल ट्रॅप झालेलं आहे. ॲनिमल ट्रॅप झाल्यानंतर त्याला साधारणपणे इंजेक्शन दिल्यापासून ते एक साधारणपणे 6 ते 7 मिनटामध्ये तो व्यवस्थितपणे बेशुद्ध अवस्थेत जातो. तिथून त्याला आम्ही उचलतो आणि आमच्या ऑपरेटिंग टेबलवरती आणतो. मग टेबलवरती आणल्यानंतर सगळ्यात पहिलं काम जे असतं ते म्हणजे कॉलर करणे, म्हणजे मेन पार्ट आहे आमचा. तर पहिल्यांदा कॉलर केली जातं सगळ्यात पहिल्यांदा. त्याच्यानंतर मग केलं जातं त्याचं ब्लड सॅम्पल घेतलं जातं आणि कंटिन्युअसली डॉक्टर आणि माझे असिस्टंट जे लोक असतात ते लोक त्याचा रेस्पायरेशन आणि बॉडी टेम्परेचरवरती मॉनिटर करत असतात की ॲनिमल व्यवस्थित आहे ना, काही प्रॉब्लेम नाही आहेत वगैरे, ह्या गोष्टींचं लक्ष दिलं जातं. आणि मग मॉर्फोमेट्रिक्स केलं जातं, त्याच्यामध्ये साधारणपणे पूर्ण शरीराची लांबी, शेपटीची लांबी, मागच्या पुढच्या पायांची लांबी, दात, त्याच्या जी स्कल साईज काय आहेत, म्हणजे हेड मेजरमेंट आणि लेंथ वगैरे ह्या गोष्टी डिटेल्स घेतल्या जातात अगदी. आणि त्याचं सगळ्यात शेवटी वजन केलं जातं की त्याचं पूर्णपणे बॉडी वेट किती होतं. हे घेतल्यानंतर ॲनिमल रिकवर होईपर्यंत साधारणपणे एक 20 ते 25 मिनटाचा कालावधी जातो, ज्याला आम्ही थोडा वेळ कव्हर करून ठेवतो. आणि टोटल ॲनेस्थेशिया इफेक्ट संपल्यानंतर तो व्यवस्थित रिकवर झाल्याची खात्री पटली की मग आम्ही त्याला रिलीज करतो.
4 years into the project, the team had deployed camera traps at hundreds of locations. At several sites, they had a surprise visitor, the striped hyena. Being scavengers, they were seen at carcasses and poultry waste. Soon, dens and resting sites were found. The striped hyenas were not just transient visitors, but permanent residents.
You know, once we started working this landscape and we said, oh my God, there are also hyenas here. We said we have to figure out what's going on with them. For the first year or so, we had some challenges, you know, locating areas where they would rest and finding places where we could trap them efficiently. And this is the time when I decided to get in touch with people from the Grasslands Trust, because I knew of their work. I know they'd been working in the Pune area for many years, and they've been doing good work monitoring populations of carnivores in this landscape.
So we at the Grasslands Trust mainly focus on the wildlife that exists around the big cities like Pune, Nagar, Nashik, and this wildlife lives outside protected areas. Till recently, Trust's main activity has been to monitor all the large carnivores, which is mainly wolves, hyenas and leopards, around the cities where they are living in highly human-dominated landscapes. Because of their shy nature, because of the terrain, because of perfect hiding spaces that they have, it's very difficult to do this direct sighting, let alone the observations that you want to actually record or do later.
This project has now completed 7 years and has seen many firsts. For the first time, high-resolution movement data on foxes, jungle cats and jackals have been captured. For the first time, a whole community of mesocarnivores have been collared in the same landscape. For the first time, such a large wildlife study has been done in a human-dominated landscape.
So the data that we've obtained from this project has allowed us to really gain some incredible insights into how these animals use these landscapes. We published a paper recently. Anjan Katna was the lead author on this. He's a PhD student on this project. So we published a paper recently on this that for the first time describes home ranges for jungle cats globally, also generates robust home ranges for golden jackals and Indian foxes. And what we found is that Indian foxes, as expected, are grassland specialists. They for all their activities and over all seasons are found mainly in grassland. That's the main habitat that they use. They avoid all the other human modified landscapes. Once the grassland habitat goes, the foxes also go with them. So although they may be common now, over time, as these grassland habitats disappear, they will also disappear.
The data from this project has started to paint a more complete picture of how these animals use these rapidly changing landscapes. The landscape and animals in it have started talking to us in a language we can decipher. There are clues embedded within the data that tell us how to learn to coexist with these species and how they are learning to coexist with us. Conservation in India has had a very narrow focus, with most efforts restricted to a few protected areas. But about 70% of the wildlife in India lives outside these protected areas. Grasslands cover over 15% of geographical land in India. But this huge landmass is barely represented in the protected area map. As our landscapes change rapidly, our study provides us knowledge about the thresholds beyond which some species of wildlife may not be part of our shared lives. Using this information, we are now able to provide recommendations that could inform policy on the grasslands. This can pave way for the less charismatic species that depend on these grasslands to continue to live alongside us and not become mere footnotes in the conservation history of India.
One of the unfortunate legacies of the British colonial rule in India was that they imagined all of India as being forested landscapes, and that anything that was not forested was then degraded. So unfortunately, they considered most of the savanna, natural savanna grasslands in India to be not important from a forestry perspective. We have large tracts of savanna grasslands. Now these savanna grasslands are fairly similar to what you see in other parts of the world, including in Africa or in Australia. There's a reason to call it the correct name, because by calling it a forest, you assume that there should be trees in it, because that's what people's imagination of a forest is. So if you don't see trees, then it's degraded. Okay, that means the trees have all been cut down and removed. So what should we do? We should plant trees back in here, right? But no, that's a ecologically incorrect view of this landscape, because these areas occur in a climatic zone that never naturally supported forests, and some of these areas have been this way for millions of years. They're not new, but unfortunately, grasslands in India are treated as what's called wastelands. So there's an official government policy that treats most grasslands or most savanna ecosystems in India as wastelands. And the government's policy is to then convert these wastelands to more productive uses. There's something published every few years called the Wasteland Atlas of India. It's published by the Ministry of Rural Development, where all these areas are classified as wastelands, and then ministries are given targets to convert wastelands to more productive uses. So we lose out on all of these habitats.
I see ecological studies like ours to be a tool for education. Can you just imagine if we had school children come out to a landscape like this and be able to say that we have foxes and jackals, jungle cats, wolves, hyenas, all here in their neighborhood, right outside their classroom. Can you imagine these school children educating each other about the world they actually live in? that to me is how ecology and studies like ours can make impacts to everybody's lives. So if we're thinking about coexistence, right, which we should, because we share this planet, right? There's coexistence where we live our lives and they live their lives, like wildlife live their lives and we exist. But there's coexistence where we understand their lives and we either try to make their lives better or we know how to work our lives around their lives. And children who know about their environment, who know the animals that are being trapped and are excited about those things, are the kinds of stewards of nature that we can hope for the future.
The future of conservation in India depends on us rediscovering our ability to live with wildlife, just as wild animals are learning to live with us. Sometimes it requires fairly small changes in the way we change our landscapes to allow these animals that share these landscapes with us to continue to thrive in them. Every large city in India has wildlife, sometimes half an hour, sometimes 1 hour away from its borders. This includes large mammals such as jackals, leopards, and even elephants. They're in their own backyard. They're learning to live with humans. It's time that we learn to live with them as well before they're lost forever.